I have to be true and I have to be a journalist. So the Bernie Sanders supporter in me wants to close my eyes and pretend Elizabeth Warren is not. If you want to call it surging, if you want to call it rising, whatever. I would love to tell you that these polls are all BS and, close your eyes. Cannot do that. I don't take a lot of stock in just looking at like one poll, but when you start seeing a trend of polls, some of the polls are BS, whether it's a small sample size, whether it is they're barely sampling young people, the way they phrase the questions. Some of the polls are indeed BS, but we can't close our eyes and pretend that she's not a significant competitor. She's not the front runner. Don't listen to CNN and these idiots. But she is a very, very tough competition right now to Bernie Sanders, in large part because the media has given her, for those of you that were paying attention in 2007, 2008, the adoring coverage Barack Obama got as a candidate, I think Elizabeth Warren has gotten that and then some. The media has not laid a finger on her, and frankly, none of the other candidates have really laid a finger on her. And there is legitimate things to go after her on, which I'm going to get to today. So I have to preface everything with she is rising, whether you want to hear it or not, whether you like it or not. There's reasons for it, which we're going to get into, but she is rising, and the Sanders campaign, frankly, should be concerned. They would be kind of stupid if they weren't concerned. Iowa, the Des Moines Register with CNN just released a poll. The poll is concerning for Bernie Sanders' campaign. There's some parts of the poll that I think show I wouldn't put that much stock into it. But at the end of the day, the poll, it was of 602 registered Democrats in Iowa, shows Warren slightly in the lead at 22, Biden dipping to second place at 20%, and Bernie at 11%. So this was just out from Iowa, Des Moines Register. So this poll, which the media is salivating on, absolutely salivating on, again, 602 registered voters in Iowa who say they will definitely attend the 2020 caucuses. So to me, that's not the largest sample size. It doesn't mean the poll isn't accurate. It doesn't mean the poll isn't accurate, but that's not the largest sample size. 602, not the largest sample size. But what I find the most concerning here, they say, is based on telephone interviews with 602 registered voters. To be clear, I'm not a polling truther. I'm not going to just be like one of these people who just says all the polls are BS and let's not believe it if it's bad for Bernie, but let's believe it if it's good for Bernie. Usually they break it down how many of those phone calls were landline, how many of those phone calls were cell phones. The Des Moines Register CNN poll just says 602 registered voters. So I don't know how many were landlines and how many were cell phones. Jen, who has gone through a lot of these polls, said, well, if they don't break it down, my assumption is mostly landlines. And if it's mostly landlines, my guess is this is a predominantly older group of people that they are sampling. It doesn't mean the numbers aren't legitimate. Warren is indeed in first place in the poll, but it also means the typical voter who might be more prone to vote for Bernie Sanders is not reflected in that poll if it's predominantly landline. I don't know which one it is. I don't know if it's predominantly landline. I don't know if it's predominantly cell phone. But the fact that the Des Moines Register and CNN don't stipulate would indicate to me it's mostly landline, which is an important thing to add. And you never, ever hear on CNN, MSNBC, none of these places, you never, ever hear them provide any context. Any context. There's a couple other elements of this poll that I think are important that, of course, you're not going to hear on CNN or MSNBC. The race is far from settled. Just 1 in 5 likely Democratic caucus goers say their minds are totally made up. while 63% say they could still be persuaded to support a different candidate. So if 1 in 5 or 63% say they could still be persuaded, that would indicate not only soft support for Elizabeth Warren, but soft support for Joe Biden at the 1 and 2 position. Quote, the data in this poll seems to suggest the field is narrowing, but my sense is there's still opportunity aplenty, Seltzer said. The leaders aren't all that strong. The universe is not locked in. So we just have that 1 in 5's mind are not made up in this Iowa poll. It also shows more about Warren's vulnerability at that top spot. Among those who say she is first for their first choice for president, only 12% say their minds are made up, while 88% say they could be persuaded to support another candidate. More Biden supporters are firm in their choices. 26% say their mind is made up, with 70% saying they could be persuaded. So, this Iowa poll, although, not going to take anything away from her, Elizabeth Warren is on the rise. It's just true. But I find it fishy. I find it fishy when small sample size, we don't know whether they only polled landlines or if the majority were landlines versus cell phones, probably an older sample size. But this poll, of course, and by the way, this was always the plan from CNN, MSNBC, Washington Post, the New York Times, i.e. the evil empire, the evil corporate empire. This was always the plan, to basically artificially inflate Elizabeth Warren, because a lot of this is, you think Donald Trump enjoyed free airtime? Free, billions in dollars of free airtime in 2016? Elizabeth Warren so far, tens of millions of dollars in free airtime. I don't have statistics to back that up, but all you got to do is watch cable news, and I do it so you don't have to. I take the punishment and the misery of watching so you don't have to. She's gotten tens of millions of dollars of adoring coverage from all of these outlets, not to mention Washington Post, New York Times. So that's going to have an effect. And by the way, the media keeps painting it as Elizabeth Warren's surge is really coming predominantly from Bernie supporters. I do think there are a chunk of Bernie supporters who have moved over to her, which, to be honest with you, I don't understand. I think if you're a Bernie supporter, you were a Bernie supporter, yes, because it was Hillary Clinton, but also because you truly understand the true crisis we're in terms of the climate, income inequality, basically the controlled demolition of the middle class. If you are so easily swayable to Elizabeth Warren, who's basically like a cheaper knockoff, and frankly, it's becoming more and more apparent, she might not even be really a knockoff. She might be more over to that establishment side. I question I don't want to say how intelligent you are, but I question how naive you are. The thing that stands out here from this one poll, here's how CNN reacted. Hope you're not on an empty stomach.
It is very good news for Elizabeth Warren. I don't think it's bad news for Biden. I think he's holding steady there. It is terrible news for the rest of the field, especially Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, let's pick up on that. Karen, is this a bad sign for Bernie Sanders? When you look at the numbers there, he's dropped from 16 to 11%, and then he lost the endorsement of the Progressive Working Families Party to Warren. Right. Of course, the two of them competing for the progressive wing of the party. Should he be thinking or starting to think about throwing in the towel now in order to benefit that progressive movement and endorse Warren?
Well, it's a little bit early, I would say, for that. That's kind of the kind of decision I think someone would make over the course of the next couple of months. I mean, look, this is an important snapshot. I agree with Joe. For starting off the fall, we know that this is the period in time when voters start to more seriously take a look at the candidates. I like to say you're sort of dating. Some maybe are getting married or they're engaged, right? But there's still some room. What I would say is problematic for Bernie and probably explains why we've seen some serious campaign staffing shakeups is the fact that the numbers continue to move downward. And we've seen that both in other state polls, and that's been the trend in the national polls. So from what we can tell, Elizabeth Warren seems to be the person who is benefiting from that, picking up those voters. So that's the trend that it seems like the Sanders campaign probably doesn't quite know how to figure out yet how to stop that. And there's so much more room for Warren begin to grow, I think that, probably Sanders, they're going to, I'm sure he'll try to have a moment at the next debate. Those debates are going to be even more important because those are, opportunities to get in front of a national audience. I suspect we may see things, there were some stories this week about Elizabeth Warren being attacked. I suspect some more Oppo research is coming because that's, when you're the front runner, that's what happens.
All right, the next debate on October 15th being hosted by CNN and the New York Times. But Karen, just to follow up quickly, if your priority is that progressive movement, in terms of the Bernie backers, at this point, should they be shifting their priorities to Warren, or is it also too soon?
It's probably a little bit too soon because, look, Bernie will probably have the money to make it to early next year when voting starts, right? And a lot of these candidates, that's really the calculation you're trying to make right now. I would say, for those who are in that bottom half, I will bet you that those are going to be the folks we'll see starting to think more seriously about getting out. But if you're in that sort of top half, you're trying to figure out, can I hold on? Can I, if in the case for Bernie, can I, build up? Can I get those progressive voters? Here's the thing about the Bernie voters, though. Remember what we saw in 2016, that some of those Bernie voters ended up being Trump voters. So we'll have to try to, track those voters to see, are they going to continue to move towards Warren and build up that progressive movement, or are we going to see them sort of be more undecided and potentially wait it out and maybe they end up Trump supporters? We don't know this time.
Jeez, it was a Saturday night, 8 o'clock Eastern on CNN, but it sounds like they're trying out some new material on the weekend to then debut in their, because by the way, for those of you who work in marketing, public relations, Jen, our wonderful co-founder of Status Coup, president, is a longtime marketing person. She does great work in marketing and other things. She knows what a coordinated campaign looks like for marketing, public relations. CNN and MSNBC, this is the continuance of a coordinated campaign to just knock out Bernie Sanders. I think originally their plan was to knock out Bernie Sanders, try to prop up Elizabeth Warren to knock out Bernie Sanders, but in the end game, go to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has been slipping and sliding all over the place, so now they want to prop up Bernie Sanders, prop up Elizabeth Warren, knock out Bernie Sanders. Preferably they'd love Biden, but Biden looks like he could collapse at any time. I don't mean that to be rude or mocking or insensitive, but he's not well cognitively, which we've been talking about here for weeks. I mean, you don't have to be a doctor to realize there's something not there, and it's only going to get worse. So now they're starting to ask for whether he should drop out because of a poll in Iowa that polled 600 people. It seems potentially could have been more landlines. They don't tell us. By the way, I just want to be clear. Some of you might not like this. This doesn't mean Elizabeth Warren is rising significantly in the polls. I think it's a little bit much to say surging because a lot of these polls, there's some significant issues with the polls. But she's rising. I mean, objectively, she is rising significantly. She is a main competitor for Bernie Sanders. But CNN and MSNBC, what they're doing here is essentially acting as a coordinated, and throw in the Washington Post, the New York Times, as a coordinated, essentially super PAC for Elizabeth Warren. So of course her numbers are going to rise. There's also another element that, well, I'm going to get to that after. So let's see if Bernie Sanders, he's in third place in Iowa, which again, not good. Even though it's a small sample size, it's not good at 11%. Bernie Sanders should drop out, because he's doing so bad in all the polls, like that California poll that just came out, September 17th, tied at 26% with Joe Biden. California, the state with the most pledged delegates up for grabs in the entire Democratic primary. Yeah, just drop out. Tied for first in the number one state. Bernie Sanders should just drop out. That September 11th poll leading in New Hampshire by, 7 points? Yeah, just drop out. A poll last week leading in New Hampshire. What is he thinking? He needs to drop out. Why did he drop out? Leading in California, leading in New Hampshire recently. Just drop out. This September 8th poll, leading in Nevada. Ugh, what is this guy doing? Doesn't he know his time is up? Leading in California in a recent poll, leading in New Hampshire in a recent poll, leading in Nevada in a recent poll. Bernie, you need to drop out. Colorado, August, this one is from a month ago, but Colorado is not like the other states. There's not a lot of polling. So as far as I know, this is one of the first polls for Colorado. Super Tuesday state, by the way. Bernie, you could call it tied with Biden, but technically leading. Colorado, just drop out. One of the swing states in the general election, just drop out. And interestingly enough, in New York, Bernie Sanders is down 7 points. The New York primary is in April. Bernie Sanders lost the New York primary in 2016. I put lost in air quotes because 200,000 people were purged off the voter rolls. So he lost. 200,000 people were purged off the voter rolls. But yes, he lost. He lost by I think 16 points. He's only down 7 points in New York right now, 6 months before the primary. That's pretty damn good. I'm saying 7 points to Joe Biden. So he's in it in New York. That is why, as I've been reporting here earlier before any other outlet, I don't know any outlets that have been reporting on this. That is why New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is trying to basically rig the primary for Joe Biden. Because other than California, which has the most pledged delegates up for grabs, Iowa and New Hampshire matter because it's the first two states and it's about momentum. But in terms of actual pledged delegates, California has the most pledged delegates by far, 400 something pledged delegates. After that is Texas, and after that is New York. Texas and New York are very close to each other, so you could say they're tied for two. So again, CNN is calling for Bernie Sanders to drop out, and you're not going to see these polls on CNN because they don't want anything that shows Bernie Sanders is actually in this. Again, drop out, leading in California in a recent poll. Drop out, leading in New Hampshire in a recent poll. Drop out, leading in Nevada in a recent poll. Drop out, leading in Colorado in a recent poll. Again, in fairness, doesn't mean Elizabeth Warren is not rising significantly. She is. She also should thank, frankly, the media, which has helped her significantly. If you watch CNN and MSNBC all day, it's wall-to-wall, adoring, loving coverage for Elizabeth Warren.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.